Hey everyone, this is Chelsea. I'm so glad you clicked on this video. Today I'm creating a mixed media canvas for the Love Your Stash challenge with the creative design team. They've been making projects all month long using their stash, and I hope you've been following along. I will leave links to their channels below in the description box. So the theme this week is wildcard, and I am going to be busting as much stash as I can on this 12 by 12 canvas. I had a previous painting on this canvas. I just gessoed over it, and I'm going to be hiding a lot of it with this paper. This is a piece of boutique pattern paper from my stash, and I am just adding a thin coat of gesso over top to help mute this really bold design. I'm going to give it a quick dry, and then I'm going to add a layer of matte medium. You could use any liquid glue. This is just what I have in my stash. I'm trying to use up a lot of my mixed media products that are actually drying out because it's been so long since I've used them. This frame here is where I'm going to have my photo, and it's actually cut from the Cricut, and I layered 4 or 5 together to give it some thickness, so it's kind of more like a chipboard frame even though it's cut from cardstock. The gray material you see there is actually chipboard. And that's what's going to help give me a little bit of lift and pop this frame up so I can nestle things underneath of it. I'm starting to play with my design here. I have some plastic flowers, some wood buttons, paper flowers, leaves. Those white pieces you see are actually paper clay done in a mold and dried. So I'm just kind of playing around to see what's going to look good where. I'm going to go for this kind of backwards L design at the bottom there. And now I have these compliment packs. I have quite a few of these actually that are untouched, sadly. There's stickers in them, and then there's also chipboard pieces. So mostly I'm just looking for the words and designs that I like and I think I want to use, but they are not at all in the color that I want. So I'm actually going to alter them with Versamark and silver tinsel embossing powder. I wasn't too sure if this was going to work or not because it has a very textured surface on the glitter die cuts, but surprisingly, it actually worked beautifully, and they look like they came that way, that they're just silver die cuts, silver glitter die cuts. So really impressed with this tinsel embossing powder. And it's something from my stash that I need to reach for more. I think I have gold, silver, and red. And they're so beautiful. They give such a nice finish to the pieces. I definitely need to use them more. So believe it or not, I probably spent hours doing this process of moving pieces around, sliding pieces over here, over there. I couldn't quite wrap my mind around of what I wanted my bottom layer to look like. So what I decided was I'm going to just start sticking things down. I know I want the most of the embellishments to be in this bottom corner. So I decided, you know what, I can't really visualize what I want the final piece to look like, but I'm just going to start sticking these down and we'll deal with whatever comes later. So I am sticking it down with actually some gloss heavy gel. Again, just using what I have in my stash. You would not need to use such a strong adhesive. You could definitely get away with probably liquid glass would work really good, or another liquid adhesive. I'm just using what I have, and you'll see that I do switch to different types of adhesive through this whole journey because this project was definitely a journey. So basically, I'm setting down my big pieces first, and then I'm working around them with all the smaller pieces. I kind of want to have pieces nestled in between. This is just my first layer, so many more things are going to happen here. You see the flowers that I'm placing up at the top. Those are just to help me kind of get an idea for size-wise once I layer flowers there. I'm not putting those exact flowers there, but I'm using them as a placeholder to help me decide how far I want my clustering to go out. And in case you haven't guessed yet, The color is not going to matter. I'm looking for size and shape and texture on the different embellishments that I'm pulling. This is a great way to use up things from your stash because you don't need to pay attention to the color or the finish or anything like that. You can see these metal flowers that I'm sticking on now. Those are actually base and bling flowers from when Close to My Heart carried jewelry pieces a few years ago. I should probably also mention those round metal discs that you see. Those are also base and bling. They were actually the blanks for the necklaces that Close to My Heart used to have. So I am just using everything in my stash that I possibly can that kind of fits into this design. I'm also adding little puddles of glue around some of the different pieces and then dumping micro beads on top of it. This is a great way to add texture and something different because they're so little. They give a really fun texture and another element to kind of extend the areas that are collaged. The only downside to using these beads is that they are messy. So you can see me here trying to clean up my little bead mess. But I was finding beads everywhere for a little while. It's kind of like glitter, kind of goes everywhere. Now, I also decided that I wanted to add some gesso over the pattern paper at the same time that I was gessoing all these pieces. So this is really the reason why it doesn't matter what color everything is, what the finish is of everything, because gesso kind of goes over everything and makes it even. So whatever you're going to add next will adhere to everything. Gesso is basically like a primer, like you would prime your walls when you're painting to help whatever you put on next to stick. Especially because some of these pieces are plastic and metal, the gesso really helps. You can also see I am adding some metallic paint. I didn't have the exact colors that I wanted because my mixed media stash and my paint stash are drying out because they have not been used in quite a while. So I was very sad as I was opening all these beautiful colors of little jars of paint and they were dried out. So I ended up going with quite a bold pink, which wasn't exactly what I had in mind. I was hoping for something a little bit softer and dustier, but I think it works out in the end. I really should have added probably like some plastic wrap or something to all my little jars. Because the problem is with jars of paint and mediums is there's a lot of air trapped in that jar. Once it's, even like half full, there's a lot of air in there, which dries your paints out even faster. I just didn't realize it was going to be so long before I used them again. So I really need to go through my stash and see what I can save. I went and looked for something else that I could add over top of this to try and mute it a little bit. And I found this silver glaze. It was a little bit darker or grungier than what I was hoping, but I needed something that wasn't dried out. So I just went for it and just started brushing it over. It is also metallic. So you can see the difference between the finish of the gesso, which is very matte, and then the metallic finish of these paints and glaze. I will be addressing that towards the end of the video because it does end up bothering me how the metallic finish all of a sudden ends and it's just matte. But for now, I'm just adding that silver to try and mute out the pink. Okay, so that is basically my base layer, my kind of collaged layer. And now I'm going back in and I'm inking the edges of my paper leaves. And also these leaves have score lines on them, so I'm folding them up at the same time. I'm using New England ivy on the darker leaves and avocado on the lighter leaves. You can see those sheets of punch outs, the leaves and the white flowers that I'm using for this project. They were all from a leftover wreath kit. And I basically had a whole bunch of flowers. I hadn't used a whole bunch of leaves. So I just punched them out and I decided that this would be the perfect project to use them on and get them out of my stash. If you don't have these leftover pieces like I do, you could also easily use dies or Cricut cuts to do something very similar and alter them with inks as well. I'm just trying to use up what I have. So on these flowers, I decided I needed some color. So I'm using Tattered Rose Distress Oxide ink and a little finger dauber. I want the color to be darker in the middle and then just kind of fade out on the petals. The middle two, like the top two, I'm using a black pen and adding just a whole bunch of little dots. I'm not sure where I got that idea, but I just decided they needed a little bit of texture or something to them. Now I'm using a bamboo skewer to help shape my petals. And you can see as I bring it up to the top, I'm curving the middle of each petal over top of the skewer, and then I'm curling the edges of the petal the opposite direction. And each layer I'm doing differently. So the first layer, I rounded the middle of the petal over the skewer. For the second layer, I rounded it from like the bottom side of the skewer up. Hopefully that makes sense. You might be able to see better on these bigger pieces. Basically, I just didn't want every layer of the flower to be shaped the same. And if I bent up the middle of the petal, then I wanted the edges to curl the opposite way, just to add as much texture as possible to them. I'm using the 3D flower thin cuts, which are still a current product, and I cut the middle of the flower with the charcoal cardstock, gave it a little curl, added a line of glue, and then I'm using my tweezers to just roll it up nice and tight, and that glue holds it really well. Then I just kind of fluff the little pieces out a little bit from the stamen, add a puddle of glue, and stick that into the glue. And that's how I did all my flower centers. Now I am using the butterfly friendship stamps on some acetate with black StazOn ink, because that dries the quickest and the best on acetate. And then I'm going to use the coordinating dies to cut all these butterflies out. Don't end up using them all, but I'm sure I will find uses for them in future projects. Now you may have noticed something changed here. The frame around the photo I cut out of silver glitter paper, and I was trying to decide if I wanted white, if I wanted silver. I decided to go with silver. Now I have some shimmer mist here for my flowers. It's actually a very subtle mist, and really on camera you can't see it very well, but in person it adds this really nice glow to those flowers, which is what they needed in my opinion. So now you can see how I'm kind of bringing things in a little bit more over the frame. I wanted to kind of cluster things a little bit more over the frame so it wasn't so just kind of floating there. I want it to look like it's more cohesive and part of the cluster. So I glued on that silver glitter Cricut cut, and then I'm just going around and working on gluing down the pieces that I have here. This is the tricky part. You get things all laid out the way you want them, and then you have to go and figure out where to put them back once you're adding glue. Now this glue I'm using isn't working the best because there's so much texture. There's so many different surfaces. I do end up reaching for my liquid glass here in a little bit because that does work a bit better. I would skip straight to the liquid glass for this. It has a nice precision tip on it, and it just holds really well to all different kinds of surfaces. I decided I wanted to have 3 layers to my design. So I have that first layer, which is where I did the collage of all the different elements and I painted over it. Then my second layer is actually going to be some flatter paper flowers and my leaves. So that's kind of layer number 2. And then the third layer are those very dimensional white flowers that I made from all those punch outs. They are quite high, and then with the stamens as well, they are quite dimensional. So I thought that would make the perfect top layer and just gives lots of interest, lots of things to look at. It's really a shame that in the video you cannot see all the detail that this project has. You really have to see it in person to appreciate all the subtle textures And a lot of that initial collage did get covered up by the layers, but I didn't really know where I was going with it. I also decided that on the left-hand side there by the banner, I needed another cluster. That area was not originally planned. I had only planned to have the two clusters, the one at the bottom and the one at the top. But once I got the banner moved down to that middle section, I thought that it really needed that extra spot of flowers and leaves just to anchor it. I really like these acetate butterflies and how they turned out. They look like a bought embellishment, even though they're just stamped and die cut. I know I saw somebody somewhere, I can't remember who, nestling their butterflies into their clusters of flowers and leaves, and I love how that looks. I usually, when I do butterflies, they're always standing out on top, and you're kind of like really prominent. But I love the idea of tucking them into the clusters so that they're there, but they're not the focal point. They just kind of add to everything. If you're enjoying this video so far, I hope you will subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, leave me a comment, do all the things. It really helps me know what you would like to see more of in the future, and also helps my channel. It tells YouTube that other people would like to see this content as well and will recommend my video out to them. Just putting finishing touches on those two main cluster areas. And I'm figuring out where those glittered hearts need to go so that I have kind of silver glitter embellishments spread out around the design. Also, that sweet title, I was trying to decide if I wanted it over to the right or to the left. I went with the left where I had originally placed it. And now I'm going to work on this area by the banner. So I pulled out some pink baker's twine, and I'm just going to string these canvas pieces. They're actually some old Prima banners, and I'm just stringing them along so that they don't look like they're floating. And then I will adhere those into place with liquid glass. They're not actually hanging there. They are all glued down. I'm really glad actually that I decided to add in this extra cluster of flowers, even though it wasn't planned from the beginning. It helps to balance out the design, and it gives that banner kind of an anchor, so it doesn't look like the banner is floating out into midair. That's actually what made me decide to do this extra cluster, because I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this banner? So that's usually how I end up doing things, is I'm solving some sort of problem that I find myself in, and then I have to come up with some creative solution. You can also see it allowed me to spread the turquoise color in the flowers. So I have a little touch of turquoise in each of the groupings. I have a little bit of gray in each of the groupings, plus those white flowers, and the leaves and butterflies, of course. So I'm just tying in elements from each group to help with the continuity. Now here I found some iridescent glaze, which was kind of what I was looking for when I found that silver glaze, but I didn't find this color at the time. And I'm hoping to kind of mute out some of the gray. And then while I was at it, I was like, well, let's paint it a little farther and see if I like having the shiny finish all over. Because it was still bothering me having the shiny and the matte together. And then once I tilted it up in the light and I saw the shiny, I was like, no, definitely not. So good thing with this, you can just add another layer. I went back to my gesso, painted gesso back over top of it. And then while I was at it, I decided to take the gesso right up to the edge of those collage clusters to kind of keep the metallic finish just on those clusters, and so it's not spreading out over top. So you can see me kind of using a baby wipe to lift some of the gesso in case I got it on too heavy. And then I'm basically just doing a light coat over all those areas to help it blend together. So here I'm just using a little bit of silver acrylic ink to make some splatters around my project. I'm using that printer paper to help protect it so that I'm not getting splatters on my photo or on areas where I don't want them. And then here is a finished look at my project. I hope this has inspired you to dig out your stash and maybe use it in a different way. And I hope these close-ups give you an idea of the texture and the sparkle, because it's really hard to capture in photographs. If you haven't yet, I hope you will check out all the other videos from the creative design team members. There's a ton of inspiration, all different types of projects. And make sure you catch Trina's video. Tomorrow is the last one in this series, and then we'll be back in March with some more inspiration.